Every day, millions of people around the world fight and serve to honor and protect their country. And in the United States, a little over 2 million people are part of military personnel. From the Army to the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force, the Space Force, and Coastal Guard. Regardless of which branch, level of experience, or role, these soldiers, these people are hardworking parents, siblings, children, caregivers, mentors to all their loved ones. To some people, the military can be a fear factor. To others, it's a great opportunity to help develop new skills, meet new people from around the world, and expand their educational experience. And speaking of opportunities, I became acquainted with a fellow collaborator named Michael Zapawa, but I just call him Mike. Mike is a retired United States Air Force veteran who was willing to share his journey being a part of the military and share his knowledge about what it takes to be successful in the Air Force. So stay tuned for today's conversation where me and Mike will discuss more about his career and his perspective as an Air Force veteran. Hey there, Arma here today. Welcome to a brand new Armavation conversation. Today I'm here with Michael, and how do you pronounce your last name? I don't want to get it wrong.
Zapawa.
Zapawa. Okay. He's a military veteran. We had a previous conversation with a group of guys, and I reached out to him to see if he was interested in sharing his story being in the military, as he is a military veteran. So yeah. So he's here today, and I appreciate that. So a warm welcome to you, Mike, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to have a talk with you.
All right. All right, so let's just start by you taking us down, memory lane. Like, what was your inspiration behind, making the decision to join the military? What branch were you a part of, and like, how did enrollment go?
Um, I was in a military family, so it's kind of something always in the back of my mind, even though I didn't initially expect to join. Um, but kind of weighing my options after high school, college didn't seem quite right. Um, I kind of know what I wanted to do, but like didn't think that going directly to college was for me. Um, money was a problem too. I could have gone on some loans, but this didn't seem like the right move. Um, and I'd kind of like teasing it out while I was in high school. I'd gone to some recruiters, kind of figure out what was out there, and it seemed like there were some pretty cool opportunities to do some really cool stuff. So kind of went down that route, and I ended up taking my ASVAB, which is a like an aptitude test you take. To kind of figure out like what you're like fit to like train for in the military. Um, and then I took another specialized test called a D lab, and that's for measuring in like a really odd way your ability to acquire language and like kind of like pattern recognition. I scored pretty well on that, so I got the opportunity to become a linguist. And I mean, that entire pipeline and the opportunities you get with that are just so multitudinous that it's really hard for me to say no. So that's what I did, and I went through the Air Force. When you enlist, you get a cert like this. Go into the DEP program. It's called the Late Entry Program. Basically, you're just waiting for a slot to open up for you to join and go to basic training. So I entered the DEP program when I was 18, and then I finally went out to basic training about 20 days after my 19th birthday.
Oh, awesome. Okay, Air Force, cool. Did you have any fears prior to joining the military, or were you just kind of like, this is the opportunity in front of me. I'm just kind of excited to learn and get out there.
I wouldn't say any fears. I'm a pretty even keel and level head person. I always have been that way. And I moved around my entire life, so I can get along with just about anyone from any background in America. So that wasn't really, I wasn't really worried about any of the environment or like the people or nothing like that. Yeah, I wasn't worried about the military culture or like, fitting in or anything like that.
Okay. And how did your like family and friends feel about you joining the military. You did say you came from a military family, so I guess was there more encouragement, or I mean, was there any like skepticism or anything like that?
I wouldn't say skepticism or anything of that nature, because of everyone's service in my family. I've got a lot of Navy, Coast Guard, a little bit of Army. I would say there's a bit of a surprise. Most people kind of thought I would go like directly to college, and when I was younger, I kind of thought that too. But yeah, no one was like opposed to it, especially after hearing like what I could be going to go do, assuming that I had the ability to get through all the training that was necessary for it. But yeah, I would say it was just a little bit of surprise because no one expected me to go into the military. But
Okay.
yeah, nothing negative.
Okay, so when you arrive on the military base or for Air Force, like what was it like being there for the first time? Like, did you guys have orientation? Like, how what was the base really like? I mean, were like dorms? Was it kind of set up like someone who's going to maybe like a university college where there's different buildings and you guys do different things? Like, what's the layout and like how is it like being on the base?
Um, that's a loaded question, because it really, really depends on what you end up doing in the military. That will determine how all of that looks like. Everyone goes to basic training if you're enlisted, and that's for the Air Force at one base in San Antonio called Lackland. And that's a really big base. You don't have dorms there. You kind of sit in one like bay where there's like 30, 40 beds, even more than that sometimes. And everyone of your same gender kind of just sleeps there. Everyone has a locker. You shower together. You go to eat together. You train together. Um, and that environment can be pretty fast paced and intense if you're not like mentally prepared for it, or you don't know what you're getting into. A lot of people, um, like their parents will kind of like push them towards the military, and they're kind of like they're not completely sold on it, or like they're kind of like a troublemaker when they were in school, and like they didn't have any other options, and they're not fully committed to altering the way they operate when they go to basic training. They really, really struggle. But if you pay attention and you listen and you know you don't um, you don't let your pride get the best of you. Basic training is really easy, at least for the Air Force. I know other branches have some other stuff that can make it more hard or a little bit easier, but um, the Air Force is very academic, so a lot of people will join the military thinking they can run away or get out of school, but like wherever you go, whatever you end up doing, you're gonna have to learn some new things. And the military is no different. Um, so like I'd say about half the time you're in basic training, you're doing classes. About 30 to 40% of the rest of the time you're doing drills or like learning movements. So like how do you do an about face? How do you march? Things of that nature. And then the rest of the stuff's kind of like extracurriculars, so like whether it be workouts or like there's like an in the field section of basic training where you go out and like pretend like you're deployed someplace. That can be pretty fun. But yeah, that's the basic training environment. Everyone goes through that. After that, everyone goes off to their specific training schools for whatever job they're trying to get into for your branch. In the Air Force, it's called AFSCs. In other branches, it's called MOSs, rates for the Navy and the Coast Guard, I think. Um, but yeah, you go off to your school, and mine's one of the longest in all of the branches. I trained for about 2.5 years before I was fully qualified. Um, and my first school, which is literally a college because you get a degree afterwards, which is called DLI, Defense Language Institute. That's in Monterey, California, and that was very similar to college. It's like a military college. You have your own room with a roommate, set up very much like a dorm, um, communal showers, uh, And the really only difference is from college is that you're doing military stuff after class, which is about 8 to 9 hours a day. So, yeah, other
Okay.
than like the additional military obligations, it's exactly the same as college.
Okay. And when you mentioned basic training alongside with your peers, what was like the chemistry like? Did you guys kind of get along, or did you guys have to do like when you mentioned drills as well? Did you guys have to do a lot of things together? Were you mostly around just men around your age, or was there different ages? Did you work alongside women? Like, what was that chemistry like during training?
For basic training, there's like generally going to be like five people in like a leadership position. You're gonna have like your squad leader, basically, someone that's appointed. Usually, like the oldest in the group is gets appointed that position, but it's whoever your drill sergeant, to use the colloquial term, determines is like the most fit for the role after a few days. Mine was a 32-year-old guy that was joining the reserves. He was really cool. And then there's four other like auxiliary leaders that kind of like lead a section of that group and take like direction from the primary leader, who gets things directly from your drill sergeant. So I was one of those, and I had a pretty good relationship with everyone that was underneath me, for lack of a better term. Um, I really just made sure people kept organized, made sure that people didn't get into undue trouble. It was really just a system to keep everyone to keep up on each other, and because when one person struggles in the group, everyone struggles. It's kind of how the mentality of basic training is. If one person screws up, the entire group is screwed up, so you all get punished or made to do some things that are annoying. Um, in terms of like cross gender stuff, that's pretty rare in basic training. The Air Force in particular had a really bad scandal in the mid 2000s or early 2000s. So that can get really iffy. They're really sensitive and really cagey when mixing genders. I did have a female drill sergeant that was like a co-leader with my other drill sergeant. Um, and there was, I think, once a week, me and my three other auxiliary leaders would go to like it's kind of like a forum with other leaders in our same week group to kind of like talk about problems and workshop solutions. And there was a few women in that group from their particular flights or companies, and we would talk to them. But that was really the only interaction I had with other women that were going through training at the same time, that weren't like people that were drill sergeants or something like that.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, let's transition to like specific roles and duties that are in your military branch in the Air Force. I want to ask you. You hinted at it before, I believe, but outside of when you're done with basic training and drills, when you actually got into the specific role you really wanted to do. So, what was your role in the military? I mean, in the Air Force, and like what duties did you have to perform throughout the day?
I was a cryptologic language analyst, an airborne cryptologic language analyst, which is a very silly title, because all of those roles don't really work together all the time. So you're kind of just doing like two of those things at any given moment, but you're trained to do all four. So I do a year and a half of language training. I learn Chinese, and then you go to like a flight school where you learn how to be an aviator. After that, you do some like survival training. So in case your aircraft goes down for whatever reason and you're lucky enough to survive, how do you deal with survival? And then if you get captured, how do you deal with that? And then there is like training involving like actually flying. So like being on a jet, how to perform your duties on the jet as a crew member. And then the last section was like intelligence related. So how do you do military intelligence? And all of that kind of encompasses my role. I worked for the NSA essentially, and did reconnaissance and anything related to that. The Air Force in general, um, is main domain is air power, so securing airspace, making the airspace safe, supporting ground troops, stuff like that, transporting troops, transporting materials. That's kind of the Air Force's thing.
What specific maybe like tools or gears that you or like certain wardrobe did you need to use while you were performing your duties? Was there any like specific tools you needed, or kind of like you just everything you need maybe is on the aircraft, or like go into the specifics of that?
So you for flyers, you wear a flight suit, and that's just like green pajamas. It's like a onesie, literally a onesie. That's actually what sold me on the position and not being like a ground person that does my job. Because I get to be in my pajamas all day, which is true. They're pretty comfortable. It was a nice perk of the job that I get to wear those all the time. Um, but yeah, you wear these green pajamas, and that's protect you from like in case there's a fire. The material is not cotton, so it's not gonna like it's not plastic, so it's not gonna burn away and like burn to your skin. It's just like a flame retardant material. Um, there's a few things you need to have on the jet, like a flashlight and things like that, in case like the lights go out. There's tons of stuff on the jet for safety, like like life preservers and things of that nature. But um, a lot of the other stuff is a little bit more sensitive. Can't really talk too much about it.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's kind of just like it's not a commercial plane by any means. It's a jammed packed jet, and it's not high clearance. If you're tall, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world. But yeah, it's a plane. It's got a whole bunch of electronics in it, all whirring, being very very loud, and creating a lot of heat.
And I'm just curious for myself because like it's interesting,
Mhm.
like fighter jets and everything like that. How fast are actually like are the jets like when you're in there and you're like driving?
Yeah.
Like how fast is it?
hmm so our jet goes pretty fast. I flew on a plane called the RC-135. People can look that up if you are so inclined. And they go pretty fast. They're not like a fighter jet speed. Those things can go well past the sound barrier. I don't know exactly what a Mach is, but they can go past Mach 1, I guess. Our jet can like almost get there. So it's no slouch. It's not like a commercial plane. But it's kind of hard to think like relatively like how fast planes go. And I can only think about them in kilometers for some reasons. So I couldn't tell you like how many miles per hour they're going because everyone else in the world uses kilometers per hour.
So I would think like with a jet going that fast, you guys would have to have like like checkups and stuff as far as your health and everything because it's going so fast. I couldn't see how you guys don't like get motion sickness.
Some people do get sick. That's like a disqualifying factor where like some people just can't not throw up when they're flying. That's a
Wow.
real thing because there's turbulence up there, and you're not always like strapped in to your seat when you're doing stuff. You need to walk around and whatnot. So that's a real thing. We do have like a special medicine system specifically for us. That's as in like people that fly on planes. So we have higher medical standards and higher fitness standards that we need to maintain. Um, and a lot of people sit on the ground for a long time because for whatever reason they don't meet those physical standards anymore. So it's pretty stringent. You can't be like you know a couch potato your entire life and then go sign up for the Air Force and expect to fly. It's a pretty niche group. A lot of people think that most people in the Air Force are like in the air all the time, but it's really only like 5% of all members are in the air doing stuff and trained to do that thing. So it's pretty exclusive. Um, and the standards are like pretty high.
I'll let you know, Mike. I have been in a fighter jet, but only in GTA.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's close enough, I guess.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
See, I know how it feels. All right,
hmm
all right. So let me ask you. About the Air Force, I know you know more about your role and what you did. Are you kind of able to break down maybe some of the other roles in the Air Force and like
Oh
what
yeah,
they kind of
yeah.
do? Yeah.
So you're gonna have like I would split it up into maybe three or four different like subsets of kind of like roles um, that kind of pertain to what the Air Force does in general. You have your movers, so like people that like move things. So that can be people, materials, like vehicles, or just like general military armaments or material. Um, One of the schools I went to actually has another group of people called that we call MatMans, material managers, that you go to school in tandem with, kind of. So I got to meet a lot of those folks, and really all they do is like they're like warehouse managers. They kind of like take inventory, determine where things are going, that kind of stuff. So that's one subsect. Another is like targeting and like combat. So like there's special forces or people that like go and rescue people that get downed and stuff like that or go down the water. There's like security forces that will help lock down facilities and like do some combat stuff like door kicking. Then you've got like folks that will like actually put bombs on people's foreheads,
Wow.
which is crazy. So that's another subsect. You've got your other people that kind of like fall into the intelligence realm, which is mostly where I was. These are folks that are, working with three other agencies like the NSA, doing briefings, keeping like generals and commanders informed of like what's going on in the world, and like helping to figure out like what the enemy's doing or like what our adversaries are doing, and like how to counter that and like make plans for the future. And then after that, you kind of have like your management, and this is like mostly officers and like higher enlisted people. They kind of fall in their own realm where they don't do like hands-on jobs anymore. It's really just like managing personnel, making decisions, and like kind of steering the trajectory of the Air Force towards the future. And then as an aside from that, the last group I'd kind of separate from management is like administrative positions. So these are like your people that like financiers, general admin, like they're just making sure like you're getting paid, you know. Arguably the most important job, even though they don't do it well all the time. And yeah, that's generally all it is. It's just like making the Air Force run from like an administrative standpoint.
Okay, and going back to your role, and your job, did you have any failure at performing? Like maybe there's a time you failed at something. Like how did you overcome it? And was any leadership mad at you for making a mistake or failing at doing something?
Um, yeah, I don't think you can get into my particular line of work and not fail at some point. Just because you're doing so many things and you're trying to do a litany of just like tasks that have nothing to do with each other, and you have to keep up with all of it. There was one time in particular, the the clinic that we were a subsidiary of that like just took care of us. They had like revamped their medical system or whatever. I don't even know what they did, but that's what they said they did. They revamped it, and they weren't taking appointments, and I needed to make an appointment to, you know, requalify myself to be a flyer, because you have to go once a year to like make sure get a checkup basically and make sure you're still good to go. So I couldn't do that, and um, because their system was taking whatever time it was taking to reinitialize, and they couldn't pen and paper it for me. I actually lapsed on that particular part of my duties, which it's my responsibility, right? It's not their fault. I could have made the appointment earlier.
Right.
It was really just procrastination on my part, and like it did cause some headaches for my leadership, because like while in reality there's no like functional like problem with that happening because I wasn't ready for a deployment at that particular moment. It wasn't going to ruin any of the squadron's plans or disrupt anything. It looks bad on them because it's like a red dot on like whatever management system they're using, or whatever management spreadsheet they have that they have to present to the commander of our squadron every week. So the more red dots you have, the worse your papers look, and the worse it makes look your flight or your group look. So anytime in the military you're making someone else above you look bad, it's going to come down on you, and that's kind of what happened. I didn't get any like real trouble, but it was definitely a memorable experience because it just like kept going up and down, like how annoyed people were, and I was
Mm.
obviously annoyed too. But uh, yeah, it was everyone was annoyed.
All right. What was some in the Air Force? What were some basic house rules, like things you guys, could do, or things that were maybe against the rules? Like what were just well, you kind of hinted on that the last question I just asked you, but what were the stages of consequences if you broke any rules? You didn't mention red dots.
So there's two ways I can answer this. The first way, so the military has its own law set, basically. It's called the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's literally a set of laws that we're beholden to that the average civilian is not. Um, there's a whole lot of these. I could not rattle off all of them off the top of my head. But like a lot of it's like common sense stuff, like don't desert, don't not report to your where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. Don't like disregard commands from your commanding officer that are lawful. Just like common sense stuff like that. And then there's like other random stuff like adultery is illegal if you're a military member, and things of that nature. So we're beholden to like a higher standard, like morally as well, I guess you could say. And that stuff can be pretty stringent. For drugs in particular. Even if like for whatever reason, you like let's say you were out and you're with some civilian friends, and somehow like some kind of like CBD oil got like slipped into a cookie or some crap, and you didn't know about it, and then you get a random drug test, which happens in the military. I got 9 of them, very unlucky, um, and they find out that you had weed in your system or CBD in your system. That even though like you didn't know and it really wasn't your fault, um, and like your command might even be sympathetic with you, a lot of times people will still get kicked out of the military for that purpose, or for that reason. Um, and like a lot of unfortunate stuff happens like that all the time. Like um, I know one guy who got hit with a DUI charge because he was sleeping in his car drunk, and the keys were near him in his car. Um, and that they consider that like operating the vehicle or intent to operate the vehicle. And he got demoted like twice over, for that particular instance, and really, there's nothing anyone could do about it. It's kind there's like just if you break like common rules or like common law in the military, like you can expect for the hammer to come down pretty hard on you. And very few people get away with it.
Mm.
Um, in terms of like other regulations, stuff like that, there's like hair regulations. So men have to have their hair a certain way. You'll see most military men with very like with a fade, and then like kind of like a short cut on top. That's super common. I wore my hair like that for 6 years. Um, the beard standards are starting to be relaxed, and tattoo standards are starting to be relaxed. But like for a long time, you couldn't have any kind of beard at all, and you couldn't have any tattoos at all. But now you can have like tattoos even on your arm that are showing. Um, just things like that. I'd say like a lot of like the weird like cultural stuff is becoming more relaxed, particularly in the Air Force, when it comes to hair and like tattoos and piercings and stuff like that. But you can expect that if you're like a person that has like gauges, and you want to join the military, you should probably expect you're not going to wear your gauges anymore while you're serving.
That's interesting, Mike. I didn't. I guess from outside looking in, I always would think that people in the military will always just be on the base until, they're released or anything like that. But you mentioned like you guys do get the opportunity to go out into the real world sometimes and not be on the base.
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, the moment I left training, I was not living on base anymore. For some people, because my training pipeline was so long, and I had attained a certain rank by the time I was done with my training, I was no longer liable to be like restricted to base. And most people, even when they're living on base, aren't restricted to base. You can still have a personal vehicle, drive where you want, like go hang out with friends not in the military. Like all that stuff's perfectly fine when you're stateside. It only gets kind of strict like when you're in like the Middle East or something like that, and you're on some base in Abu Dhabi, then when you can leave base and like how much you can interact with locals, that can be restricted to a certain extent. Especially during COVID, it started getting a little strict and stringent during COVID for a while, but all that stuff has been relaxed at this point. But yeah, it just depends on where you're at. Most bases stateside, you're not going to have any problems like that.
Okay, that's interesting to know. Let me ask you, are you able to break down the different ranks in the Air Force? Maybe from like the bottom all the way to the top.
Yeah, so every branch is going to have their own system. A quick rule of thumb for everyone is that you just use E for enlisted, O for officer, and that goes through 1 through 9. So like E1 would be the lowest, um, and E9 would be the highest for enlisted, and then similarly for officers. Um, the first, I guess you say three, but four ranks for the Air Force is your airman ranks. So E1 through E4, these are like your frontline kind of people. So like these are the people that are just trained or like they gone through training recently. They're still getting acquainted with the job and they're kind of doing like the busy work or like the grunt work, you could say, a lot of the time. They're very hands-on, getting into the nitty-gritty, doing a lot of like the basic tasks that are required for a job until they get more experience. And then after that, from E5 to E7 in the Air Force, you have your sergeant ranks. So this goes from staff sergeant to technical sergeant. Sorry, E6, E5 to E6. These are like your frontline supervisors. So like if you're working at a restaurant, your manager would be like an E5 or an E6. These are the people that like they supervise the E1s through E4s, the airmen, and they kind of train them and they make sure nothing is like going on like the lowest level. They kind of like handle like arguments or like let's say someone like me, missed getting an appointment on time. They would be the first person to handle that problem and try to rectify it before it like moves up the chain and make someone that's more important to get worried or like annoyed. And then after that, for enlisted, you have your E7 through E9, which is your master sergeants to chief master sergeants. And these are your senior enlisted people. They're at that point, you're no longer really like doing any of the hands-on work when it comes to the job. You're kind of like there for advice for the people below you in terms of the job, but other beyond that, you're really just managing people. So like how many E5s do I need to be filled at this particular location? Um, how do I fight for more like people in my workforce? How do I advocate to like commanders and like generals and stuff like that to say that hey, we need more personnel or hey, we need more funding, like stuff like that. It becomes very managerial, very like operations based, like big picture Air Force instead of like the nitty gritty and like granular stuff. That's basically what it looks like on the enlisted side.
Okay. And what are some how often do you guys like receive awards or recognitions? Like how do you like if you guys receive any of these, how do you receive these awards and how do you rank up? Like is there like maybe a little ceremony? Like do you guys get badges, patches? How does that work?
Um, that's very career field dependent. Generally, when you're looking to rank up, you're competing with other people in your career field. Um, that there's that's not necessarily true in all career fields. Um, from my experience, generally speaking, E2 to E4 is guaranteed as long as you don't like screw up in some major way. You don't have to do anything to attain those ranks in the Air Force. You kind of just have to be a good boy or girl and just wait, essentially. There's one program called Below the Zone that you can get E4 earlier than your peers, and that's like an award you get. All awards in basically every military branch are based on like a bullet sheet. So like, um, it's kind of like a resume for your year. Basically, you talk about all the great things you did that year in like the most charitable and grandiose way possible, and try to convince someone above you that I'm a good leader. I'm already doing things that are worthy of the higher rank, so I should be awarded the next rank. And then there's a point system that's related to that, um, and that really varies year to year on how higher ups decide that point system is going to work. Generally speaking, it's broken up into three categories. The first one is like your enlisted performance, and that's the bullet thing I was talking about for like what you did that year. Um, and that's how most awards are granted, regardless. So like if you're going for a quarterly award, it'd be the exact same way. You just do a bullet sheet of all the great things you did that quarter, and hopefully it's racks and stacks comparatively well against your peers. And there's tons of different variations of awards. There's like base awards or squadron awards. There's like Air Force wide awards, all that stuff. And then there's the second part for ranking up is how good you are at your job. So most career fields have like a test that is specific to your job that you take to demonstrate like your skill at your job, like book wise, like how much stuff do you know about your job. My career field didn't have that, unfortunately, but yeah, most career fields do. And then the third part of that is like a aptitude test for like Air Force knowledge. Um, and that's rank dependent. So when I took mine for achieving E5, which is sergeant, um, a lot of the questions are related to, like some of it's Air Force history, some of it's like Air Force standards. So like what what's the exact inch length you need to have your hair as a male, or like what is the what's the pony's tail standards for women, things of that nature. Um, and then the score you get on that test also applies to like your overall score. Um, and basically, all the people in your career field are rack and stacked at the end of the year when they're determining who's going to promote and who's not. And if you get enough points, then you'll be promoted. If you don't, then you have to wait till next year. Um, I promoted my first try when I was in my fourth year, at the end of my fourth year. And then if I had stayed in longer, I would have tested for the next one. But I had gotten out the year that I was going to test for that.
Yeah, yeah, I had to ask you that because sometimes on TV and media, it seems like there's this whole celebration, like, oh, you ranked up, here's your badge.
Yeah,
So I had to ask that.
it's not that serious. Sometimes they hold like a little ceremony, but like it's not huge. I mean, when you have like 400 people in your squadron and like 10 people or 20 people are making E5, it's like woohoo. Now, when you get to the higher ranks, then it gets like pretty serious because then like people know you're committed to the military at that point because you've put in so much time and effort to get that far. So those become like a little bit more celebration. I would say like the biggest celebrations in the military are generally like retirements. Like when people that have been in for like 20, 30, 25 years retire, and they've achieved all these things, and they've attained such a high rank. Those celebrations can get pretty big. But other than that, I wouldn't say like military celebrations are particularly crazy
Mm,
or, extravagant.
right, right. I just want to ask you, Mike, is there any maybe hidden facts or maybe like false assumption that people on the outside that don't know so much about the Air Force, uh, is there any false assumptions that you've heard out there about being people in the military that you may want to clear up, or anything that we may not know that we think is true but is not true?
That's a hard one. So I'll preface before I start talking about this that a lot of my friends are in the military or have military service backgrounds or military brats like I was. So I will say I'm pretty insulated in that sense, where a lot of people I know are related to the military. But a few misconceptions about the Air Force, and then like more specifically the NSA, because that's probably where my knowledge sets the the most clear, or broadest. First about the Air Force, if you see someone wearing a flight suit, they're not a pilot necessarily. It's highly unlikely that they're a pilot. I would walk around like a Baker's, which is like a Kroger store, when I was in Nebraska, and I'd be in my flight suit, and like people ask like what plane I fly, and they're like, I don't fly the plane. I'm just on the plane doing stuff. I didn't say that back then, but I mean, say this now. At least we say it in private. But the pilots are like our chauffeurs. Like we're the people actually doing the things on the plane. The pilot's just like taking us where we need to go. So we're just as important as them, but we're not pilots. Another thing is like I said this already, but a lot of people think that just because you're in the Air Force, you're in the air. The vast majority of people aren't in the air. Um, Vast majority of people aren't even doing anything related to planes directly. The Air Force does a lot of stuff, and very little of it is related to planes. I think the Navy actually has more like jets than the Air Force does. So I know it's like not intuitive because we're called the Air Force, but just because you're in the Air Force doesn't mean you're going to be doing anything related to planes. And then I guess the last misconception about the military in general. A lot of military members I know, and me included, get this weird feeling when like we get thanked for our service. I don't know, it's just really awkward. I'm not saying it's a bad thing or that people shouldn't do it, but like I guess um, I guess what I would say is if you do say it, be genuine about it because it doesn't feel very genuine most of the times. Just feels like something people say. So yeah, I think people when people hear that someone's a veteran, they just automatically assume that that's something they want to hear. When I don't think that's the case. I think if you're going to say it, let it be from a genuine place. If like you don't actually care that much, which is I think for most people they don't actually care that much. Like just don't say it. And we're still cool. It's not that big of a deal. Very briefly about the NSA. A lot of people are very afraid of the NSA and all the three-letter intelligence agencies that exist in America. I'm the first to tell anyone that they're not scary and that they're working in your best interest. People are very distrustful of the federal government, which I understand to a certain degree. But if you're really distrustful of all the little cogs in the machine, all the little 19, 20-year olds that are working for the NSA, like, I feel like that's more of an indictment of your neighbor than it is of, like, the federal government. Because really, it's a bunch of 19, 20, 21-year olds, and then, a smattering of a bunch of other ages that are doing most of, like, the ground, like, grunt work of the NSA. And I can't say there's no bad apples out there, but there's no like conglomerate of 20 year olds trying to go after your information as an American. That's just not happening. So hopefully that assuages anyone's fears.
Very interesting, very interesting, especially about
Yeah.
the thank you for your service part.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do see what you're saying. Like a lot of people will say it because they feel they need to say it. because in some way it's
Yeah.
like, oh, this person worked hard for the country. I need to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's transition and once again if you know if it gets too deep or anything, just let me know if you want to skip it or anything. But let's get into
Sure.
how the military uh and the psychological effects has a psychological effect on soldiers, and how maybe it had an impact on you, or and just talk about some current events in our world today. So I want to ask you, how did the military affect you mentally? Was it more good or bad? Have you noticed how maybe being in the Air Force has had an effect on your teammates as well?
Okay. So for me, I'm like rock solid, dude. Like, it's really hard to bother me. So, um, no, I can't say like anything that happened in the military like directly affected me mentally or like, took me off balance. But I will say there's definitely a lot of folks that join the military that can't cut it. Because it's too like I'm not no, I won't say they can't cut it. They don't allow themselves to cut it. I think being in the military, whatever job you do, requires a lot of fortitude because it's not an environment like the corporate world. In the corporate world, you can say like screw it and just leave if you really really think that an environment's toxic or whatever. In the military, it's not like that. You have to get along with people you might not like traditionally get along with. You have to work with people that may come from backgrounds that are completely disparate from your own. And a lot of times, I say like 99% of the time, you don't have a choice. You have to work with those people. And yeah, I think that's a hurdle that a lot of people struggle to jump over for some reason. I'd say that's pretty rare. I think a lot of people, assimilate just fine, and they make new friends. They get awesome experiences, and it's a good deal. But there's definitely some people that I know that like came into the military with predisposition, or like came into the military with kind of like pre-existing like mental like struggles that they hadn't quite resolved yet, and the military compounded those things because it asked so much of them and wasn't ready to get back to them. Because when you're in training for 2.5 years or 3 years in some instances, especially since a lot of us were going through training while COVID was happening, like it's a lot of taking. Like the military's like asking a lot of things, just taking. It's like, hey, learn this, learn this, learn this, learn this, learn it at a very fast pace, and then apply it, apply it, apply it, apply it. It takes like 4 years for you to feel settled enough to where you can start thinking about yourself and like start like, hey, I need to go to the doctor for this thing, or I need to go see a therapist for this thing, because all those resources are there. But like, I think for a lot of military members, there's an aspect of pride where like I'm in the military, I shouldn't have to worry about those things, or I shouldn't have to like have these issues because, we're in the business of killing people. So I understand that aspect of it, but there's also like a pressure of, if I go to the doctor or something's wrong with me, then it'll delay me so much to where I can't actually do this cool thing that I've been training for the past 3 years, and that's also a struggle. So for my job in particular, that was a lot of the reasons why people fell through the cracks or, like ended up not making it through training, was because they were holding themselves back mentally, or that point in their life was not the correct time to like be in the military and have that much demanded of you. Even though they're like perfectly intelligent enough and perfectly capable of getting through the course material, it was just too much. It was the hydrant was too much for them to swallow all at once.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I could definitely see where you're coming from with that. Yeah, let me a little short story from my end, and then it'll go into asking the next question. So I remember being in elementary school, and our teacher took us on a class trip, and we went to visit military vets, and most of them were like disabled. They were senior citizens, and I was happy to see them. At the same time, I felt bad because of the state they were in due to their injuries, like memory issues. Just they just weren't in the best shape, and so
Yeah.
you know And at the time, we were kids, so like we were just so energetic and happy to like interact with them, and we were kind of like, oh, they're not really interacting with us. They kind of don't want to really be bothered. And
Yeah.
but I also understood, even though I was a kid, because they didn't really want to share their stories because of what they were going through. So, well, this was maybe a year or two ago, but there's been vets that have complained about not receiving certain benefits, or having issues with trying to receive those benefits. So I wanted to ask your thoughts. Um, what's your honest opinion on military vets who have been injured from war? Maybe they have, mental disabilities like PTSD, and other vets who feel they aren't seeing much benefits after serving, or after retirement.
I will say that like as of right now, the infrastructure to support disabled vets and like the benefits for veterans in America are really good. Um, at the same time, I can also acknowledge that they weren't always like that, and um, this has only been a change that's been occurring over the past 15 years or so. And there's still problems. So for like older vets, like we're talking like Vietnam era, Korean War era, even like Gulf War and like war on terrorism era vets, um, I there was definitely a lot of folks in that group that are still underserved, and a lot of that's due to information. Like I get that information now because I'm mandated to take like a bunch of different courses before I leave the military on like all the things that are available to me after I leave. So I get off on the right foot, know what resources are, available to me and what I can use to like, you know, jumpstart my life after the military. But like, if you're a Vietnam like disabled vet, you're not hearing about all that stuff unless you go in person to a VA somewhere, and there's someone that has the right mind to tell you about these new things that are available. I will also point out that like there's two types of veterans from like the earlier era. There are veterans that are disabled and need help and they aren't getting it, and there's veterans that are disabled that want help or need help, but they aren't willing to compromise to get it. So like there are certain compromises you may make for like assisted veterans living, right? You can't be on drugs. You have to like actively trying to get a job in most places, and this is definitely not all veterans or even like a large proportion of veterans from my knowledge, but like there are folks out there that will, complain about the system, but also not want to make compromises in their own life to, be supported by that system that's out there for veterans. So there's definitely still problems. I think it's largely information gap, but there's also people that are biting off their own foot when it comes to, how much the federal government can assist them.
So I mentioned this on my channel before about the House passing a bill for men ages 18-26 to, well, I know selective services for men already, but maybe a potential draft depending on if there is a big event or a World War II occur, and they want women to be considered a part of that as well. What are your honest thoughts about the bill or a potential draft, or there being a potential World War III, as they would say it?
Well, World War III thing is a pretty easy kill. I don't foresee any World War III type things happening in the near future. Um, I I can't speak much on why I say that, but what I
Mm-hmm.
can say is that the governments of the world do not seem like they want any kind of like massive conflict, even the ones that are very adversarial. So it even if something like really big or like some huge accident happened, the way I see the machinations of like federal governments across the world posturing, it doesn't seem like they are willing to escalate to the point of like some kind of world war. Like there would be a breaking point, like vis-a-vis Cold War era type of, like throwing their hands up. That would prevent us from getting to that point, I think. In terms of the draft, like I served with lots of women. They were great at their jobs. Some of them had a chip on their shoulder because they were women and they're in the military, which is like 75%, 80% men. That's just off the top of my head. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, like for I think for most positions, they're just as capable. Like I can think of like some special ops stuff to where like some of the physical and training standards might be really hard to meet for like way more women out there than there would be for men, just because of like physical averages that are accrued through puberties, the difference of the two puberties. Like, it's a lot hard to find a woman that's going to meet some of like the crazy like lung capacity standards for like a Navy SEAL for some or someone like that who has to like hold their breath for like 2 minutes or something wild underwater. But like beyond that, like I don't think we're drafting those positions anyway. Like sure, draft women. I don't. I think we should probably avoiding drafts by any means necessary. But like I don't see a reason why women should be excluded.
So I would like to go into, share some of your, your own reflection as part of, as far as your departure from the military, and then you maybe go into sharing. I think you had one thing you wanted to share as far as memorabilia, and yeah. So if you can get into it or not, it depends. Why did you leave the Air Force, and what was it like being able to go back home? Was there like a sense of relief that, oh, I'm finally out, or was it more like you felt content with, having the experience to be in the Air Force and, being able to close a certain chapter in your life?
Yeah, well, I would say it's more the latter. Like it's not like I'd been away from home for like a particularly long amount period of time. Like you get leave in the military, you get 30 days of paid leave every year in the military, not including like time off from like deployments or stuff like that. So like I'd go home pretty often after I was done with my training, and by the time I was out of the military, I had another 60 days of leave I just hadn't used. I just tacked on to the end of my enlistment and got paid for. So like I don't know the I would say like the two best things I got out of the military was the experience, and that includes like all the people that I met, and the other half was like this the financial freedom. If you're like smart with your money, especially if you get a really good job like I do, it get that pays more than normal, enlisted jobs. Like you can make bank and you can save a lot of money, and you can really set yourself up for success after you're out of the military. Because like I'm in college now with no debt. I have my own car. I have my own place to live. I don't pay rent. I my school's paid for. The military, I mean, the federal government pays you to go to school for at least 36 months, 4 years at least of college, depending on how your credits line up. Um, and the school itself is also paid for. Um, that's an awesome deal. Um, so there was one thing that would have kept me in the military, and that was joining like one of their like special agent programs. Each branch has their own like FBI of sorts. And I just thought it'd be really cool to be completely honest. But they just wouldn't release me from my career field because of how like undermanned it is. So I just wasn't a huge fan of the job I was doing. There was a lot of political stuff involved that I got wrapped up into in the last like year and a half that was just, I felt tiring to me. I felt like I wasn't getting a ton of stuff done, and it was never my plan to stay and make a career out of the military in the first place. There's just better things that I want to be doing for my life and for my country. So it was a good experience. I don't regret it. I would do it again. Um, but there wasn't really much there keeping me or like much reason to stay in afterwards.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, how did your friends or family feel in response to you leaving the military? But based on what you said, I would think they're proud of you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I got a free associate's degree out of the deal, some like skills that are really hard to attain elsewhere. Like I learned Chinese, I can, if I really, really want to, and I don't want to go back, don't want to finish school, I can go work for the NSA and make like $100,000 a year, and be content for the rest of my life, not going to do that, but I'm pretty set for the rest of my life if I really, really want to be. Um,
Wow, that's
I
awesome.
feel like everything's lined up pretty well.
Okay. How did your view on society or the world change before and after joining the military?
I guess it changed me politically in a couple ways. Because I'd lived in California for 2 years before I joined the military. And um, California is a very, very blue state. I'm from the South. Um, and I'm not like, I'm not a right-leaning person by any stretch of the imagination, but California is a little bit too left-leaning for my sensibilities at the time of the ripe age of 17. Um, so I would say that like I became very critical of, of their thought processes and stuff like that. But I think joining the military and like um, being around a more of like a hodgepodge of different political ideas kind of balanced me out again. Um, and kind of like found my true north in that sense, to where I can be very commiserate of both sides and like the way they think. And I think I have a really good understanding and a sympathy even for like why people vote the way they do or think the way they do or like come to the conclusions that they do. Um, and so I think that was good. I think that was a good change. And I think more broadly, I'd say like working for the NSA and having access to the breadth of like just knowledge and information that I had access to, um, just about the world and America and things of that nature. I was already a person that was pretty trustful of institutions from the get-go, but like after that, like I think it pretty much solidified that most people are trying their best. The vast majority of people are like average Joes that are just like working a job, um, and trying to, contribute to society. Um, Most people are, just decent folks that are getting by in the way they best way they know how. And that that is cross cultural. That is not like exclusive to America. It's Russia, China, all those other places just full of those kinds of people. If I were ever to like write a treatise or like build a political platform at any point, I think my experiences with the military at the NSA would be foundational into the way that I would want to communicate those things. Because I think people have, especially in America, have a very deep trust of the federal government and like institutions and just like the powers that be, I guess. When I think a lot of those are a little bit misplaced or misfounded. So yeah, I just think that's less of a change and more of like a solidifying of something that I had already kind of like been keyed into.
Right, like you gained a new perspective. Yeah. And at the end of the
Yeah,
day, like you mentioned, everyone's human. Everyone's
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So what are you based on that? What are some things you think maybe the Air Force can improve, or and what things you think they're doing right already?
Oh man, they can improve a lot of stuff. I think there's far too much like internal politics at play. Like personal relationships are, man, networking is far too important in like a institution that's supposed to be like as non-biased and like for the good of the nation, like focused as they tout themselves to be. Like if your commander has like a poor relationship with a commander from another squadron that you have to work with, like working with that squadron becomes infinitely more difficult to get like things done. It's Yeah, that's really annoying. I don't know how they can clamp down on that. To be completely honest, I think that's just like a human problem, less of like a military problem. I just think like it presents itself or expresses itself uniquely in the military because you want your military to be efficient. You want like there to be less waste because it's taxpayer dollars, you know. Like America is one of the most like overfunded militaries in the world, and I will say that like there is a decent amount of waste that occurs because you know the way that the Air Force handles money, and I'm sure the rest of the branches handle money. Um, so I think the handling of money and like some of the weird political stuff that happens that can definitely be improved. I don't have any solutions off the top of my head. I have to really, really think about it. Um, I'd say I'd say the Air Force is a really inclusive culture, though. I can't speak for other branches, but I would definitely say we're better than the Marines. Um, yeah, just a lot of folks in the Air Force are, you know, coming from different backgrounds, and it's a very diverse branch, which I like. So I think diversity helps solutions get run through the, you know, marketplace of ideas faster. Um, Something else the Air Force does pretty well, I'd say, is like support. I think the people at like the highest echelons of, you know, power or like, you know, leadership generally have a pretty good head on their shoulders, and they are like I think they do genuinely care about, you know, um, the average service member, you know, the person that does one contract like me, stays for 4 years or for 6 years. Um, and Yeah, I think like oftentimes that people in my position like that can feel like underserved or like disregarded because, you know, we're not going to be part of the system for very long and we're kind of like a blip on the time scale. Um, but I do think there's like a lot of people in leadership that really care in the Air Force about those folks. Um, but as an aside from that, one thing that they can improve is making it making the Air Force more competitive to keep people in. Because other comparative air forces from our sister nations like the UK or Australia and stuff like that, um, for jobs like mine that require like a very high level of specialization, that require 3 years of training at least, generally, that require like additional skills beyond that you kind of have to like fend for yourself for that, you know, things that aren't like immediately presented that you can only gain through experience. um, the Air Force has to do a better job of giving people like me or any of my other peers a reason to stay in the Air Force for longer that isn't like 20 years for retirement. Because the fact of the matter is that with the skills you attain from my job, like anyone without like a family that's, you know, single and in their 20s, they can do way better in the private sector with those skills than they ever would, you know, staying in the Air Force. Like most people that stay in, it's only because they have like families, and that the medical benefits you get from being in the military when you have a family are unmatched, absolutely unmatched. So those are the main criticisms I think I have.
Mike, I think you mentioned you said about the Air Force. There's a lot of inclusivity. I'm sorry, inclusivity. Where like
Yeah.
where just out of curiosity, what were some of the different backgrounds in the Air Force, like from different countries specifically?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in basic training, there was a girl that grew up most of her life in Australia that was with us. There's a bunch of people that were like DACA recipients that were getting citizenship through joining the military. Um, I met my first like trans people in the military. Um, I hmm, yeah, man, it's just like man, people from like every state. I think you know, I've lived in a lot of different places in the country. I think I've lived in 9 different states up until now. Um, and I think only because of the military would I have met someone from like Oklahoma, you know, or you know, Maine, because I don't have an immediate reason why I'd like pass through those states or stay for an extended amount of time, you know. Um, and People discount like how different, you know, places in the US are, but like East Coast to West Coast, Midwest, Northeast, these people are really, really different and they have very different backgrounds.
Right.
So yeah, but I've met like people with Chinese answer. Like there was this one Taiwanese guy that I worked with. Um, yeah, like tons of different backgrounds, Korean, Spanish, um, or like uh, Latino, Latina. Um, yeah, just like tons of different backgrounds.
Yeah, that's always good because you can learn a lot just from different people all around the world, instead of
Yeah.
sticking to one specific, demographic. But yeah, that's really cool. Okay, this is a two-part question right here. Would you encourage other young men and women to join the Air Force or other branches of the military? And then the second part to this question is, what advice would you give to someone who is interested in joining the Air Force or another military branch?
I would say as of right now, I would recommend it. Um, I do think it's a generally pretty good idea. There's a couple problems with that though. The first one being is that you can't join the military as a way of avoiding school. A lot of people try to join the military and because they think like they hate school or whatever. You can't. You can never escape school. School is a demon that follows you. It's your shadow. You can't escape it. It's you have to learn things. I'm sorry. Learning is a part of life, and they'll give it to you in a school-like format with homework and assignments and things of that nature. So if that's why you think you want to join the military, don't do it. Figure yourself out first. Figure out why you hate learning and get back to me, and then we can talk about it. So don't do that. But if you really want to go to college and you don't think you can afford it, or there's like a specific college you really want to go to that's really freaking expensive and you don't quite have the resume yet to get in there on like a full ride scholarship or like a scholarship that makes it manageable in any way, shape, or form, yeah, sure, join the military. It'll boost your resume for like applications to schools. In the Air Force specifically, and I think in the Navy as well, they have their own community college system, so you can get a degree while you're in the military, and then spin that up into where you want to go later as a transfer, as a transfer, not transfer, as a transfer, or you can get like a an advanced degree after that. So for education specifically, it's actually a really good idea. If you want to get into politics at any point, the military is a great avenue for that. It'll bolster your leadership skills. It'll give you opportunities to, again, create that resume for yourself. You meet some awesome people. The military is a great like touchstone experience wise for understanding how Americans think. Because unlike your Hodunk town in Tennessee that has 10,000 people in it, you're getting a really like decent sample, an accurate sample of different people from across the country. So if you grew up in the Midwest, you grew up in West Virginia or something like that, like be ready to open your mind and like experience someone from California or Washington or Vermont, and have conversations with them that aren't combative, So if you're willing to be open-minded and you're ready to like work with some unique people and people that you wouldn't have accessed if you stayed in whatever town or whatever city you grew up in, yeah, go for it. That's in and of itself, that's a valuable experience, I think. But the last thing I would recommend if you're interested in joining the military is study for the ASVAB. The ASVAB, again, it's the aptitude test you take to determine what you qualify for in the military. I think like the Marines will take you if you get like if you scribble your name in crayon, the Marines will take you. For the Air Force, I think you need to scribble your name in crayon and then know what 2 plus 2 is. But despite the fact that you can get in the military with just that bare minimum of knowledge, you should try your best to do better because the opportunities that make themselves available to you if you score well on that test will give you an edge in determining one whether you want to make the military career because all the fun jobs are locked behind higher AVHIP scores. You want to work on a plane, you got to have a higher ASVAB score. If you want to do some cool intelligence stuff or be a spy or anything of that nature, anything that sounds cool and any of like the weird James Bourne like interesting military stuff you can think of. If you want to do that stuff, you need to get a higher ASVAB score. That's just the name of the game. And academia or your academics are perpetually important. So study for that test. If you're in high school and you're thinking about joining the military, pay attention to algebra class. Maybe do some reading on like mechanical engineering, like know what a wrench is, know what a nut versus a bolt is, has a basic idea of like what circuitry is and like how circuitry works, because those are also a part of your ASVAB test. And like knock it out of the park, man. Yeah, knock that test out of the park and give yourself the broadest available options for joining the military, because that's where you'll see the most success. Because if you don't, then they're just going to place you wherever they want you, or place you as like infantry, or place you as like a security forces. And while it works for some people, a lot of people don't end up liking those jobs. And they try to get out of them as fast as possible. And not only can that like waste your time if you're in a job that you don't like, but it also can make your life miserable, because if you don't like your job, the Air Force is kind of like, hey, you signed up for this and we have this contract, and you have to at least, follow through on this contract before you can release you. Because if not, if you get just honorable discharge from the military, you're screwed. That thing looks terrible. You can't. It's so hard to get a good job if you have a dishonorable discharge. It's like being disbarred as a lawyer. It's a stain that you cannot remove. It's only one step up from being a felon. Like, don't get dishonorably discharged. Go in the military. Be serious about it if you want to do it, and take like the entire process from start to end seriously. Have fun. It's gonna be fun regardless of whether you take it seriously or not. But you know, take your job. Take like the process of applying. Take the testing. Take the academics seriously.
Awesome. I'm glad that you added stress that people should take it serious, because that's the important thing. Like you said, some people may think it's an alternative to make life easier for them, but it's really something you should take serious. So that was well put and
Yeah.
brutally honest, brutally honest. Awesome. So I know, Mike, you mentioned that there was one thing you were okay with sharing, something that you felt it was important to you, or something cool you just wanted to share that others may find interesting. So yeah, you can do that when you're ready.
Okay. I've got like one thing and a half really. I've got this thing. It's got my name on it, my rank, from when I separated. This is a litho. It's basically just a little. This is the jet I flew on. This is my squadron's patch.
Awesome.
My name ranks right there. You get this when you leave. Most squadrons will do this for you when you leave the military. It's kind of just like a farewell present. The glass on mine broke in transit, so I have to get this re-glassed, but still really cool. And just
And
get a
what are
picture of
those?
that.
Are those signatures on the?
Yeah, those are just people in my squadron
Oh,
that
okay.
signed it.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome. It's kind of like a
yeah, it's
yearbook.
really cool. Yeah, almost. Yeah, it's like a 6 year yearbook. Um, and then like the last like the half thing is like one of my old patches. When you're a flyer, you get these little things. These are wings. And you're a flyer for a certain amount of time. They become permanent, which means you don't ever lose them. And this isn't like an official patch. The official one has like my rank on it. It doesn't have like all this little design on it. I got this one in Japan, at a
Oh
place
wait,
called Tiger Patch. If you're
I'm
ever in
sorry, Mike. Can
Okinawa,
you hold that closer?
yeah, yeah,
Oh, that's cool.
but, yeah. It's back. My name's backwards, but yeah,
Awesome.
uh, yeah. So like you put this on your chest when you're flying. You've got the American flag on one side. You got your name on the other. It's pretty cool. You know, but yeah, if you're a flyer, you'll get one of something similar to this. And if not, you'll still get your name patch. It's not gonna look as cool as that one.
Wow, that is really awesome. I really like how you had your little 6 year yearbook all in one frame.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I'm sure you felt great receiving that and with the work
Yeah.
and the opportunity you had. That's really cool. Thanks so much for sharing that. All right, Mike.
Yeah.
I think I mean you gave a lot of knowledge about the Air Force and your experience in general, and I definitely learned a lot. And I'm really glad that you took the time to be vulnerable and open in sharing your experience. So thanks again, and thanks for sharing some of your items and sharing some of those memories that you have. So yeah, this was an amazing conversation. Thanks to anyone who's tuned in and has watched this video. If you like content such as this, feel free to like and share. Um, there was a lot of great knowledge on the Air Force and military in general. Also, comment down below in the video. I'll share Michael's links if you want to get in contact with him or ask any other questions about the Air Force if you're interested, because he's a good resource. With that being said, I hope you guys should enjoy today's video, and I'll see you guys in the next time, and take care.